I want to take just a very short moment to introduce Professor Hatem. He's a professor of philosophy at St. Joseph's University. He spoke yesterday, he's speaking today. He will also speak tomorrow at the same time in the same place on pure love in Islam and in Christianity. And I hope that many of you will be able to attend that lecture as well. I met Professor Hatem last August in Romania. I told the story briefly yesterday. I won't repeat the whole story today, but it was fortuitous that he, a Lebanese philosopher, and I, a Utah Mormon, should meet in Romania at an Orthodox monastery. We both happen to think there must be something about the hand of God in this. And he's a very pleasant fellow, but more important to me, I think, is that he's also a very well-educated, very intelligent reader of Latter-day Saint texts and very interested in Latter-day Saint religion. So I give you Professor Hatem and hope that you will continue to hear what he has to say.
Thank you very much. I would like to add to what Mr. Falconer said, that my lecture is based on one of my books, entitled as the title of the lecture, The Three Nephites, the Bodhisattva, and the Mahdi. I shall present to you the first chapter of this book. The book is written in French, and I hope that it will be totally translated into English. In the lecture of yesterday, I said at one moment that religion has a center, and in a center, two aspects. One aspect is mysticism, the longing towards the absolute, the desire to be united to God, or the desire to be a kind of God oneself. And the second aspect is what I call messianity. Today I shall speak about messianity, and tomorrow it is the topic of mysticism. But please consider that messianity is not messianism. The word messianity means an anthropological or philosophical attitude of man. I shall use a term by Heidegger, an existential. This existential is the aptitude to save other person. Isaiah says, if you give your soul in pasture to the starved and you satiate the grief-stricken, your light will rise in the darknesses and your darknesses will be as full noon. By human messianity, I mean the disposition to save others. Being intrinsically an existential, it belongs to the general structure of the human being. Previous to all voluntary decision of the person, it pertains to man's ethical constitution, and it expresses itself in both ordinary and uncommon happenings. Messianity is an acute mode of human virtue, the gen of the Confucian school, radicalized by Mencius, according to whom any man is endowed with a heart which cannot stand the suffering of others. It would be inhumane not to feel any compassion. It's all about knowing how to extend one's pity towards what is perceived, to pity towards what cannot be perceived, which amounts to the achievement of universality. As for Zen itself, it is rooted in the simple to be with, since the word is composed of the sign, the word in Chinese, is composed of the sign referring to man and of number 2. So compassion is, humanity is man and 2. In my opinion, one should regard the messianic ethics as one of the sources of religion, the other one being the mystical source. Certainly, it is not always possible to reveal the ore of Messianity in all religions. In some, the layer is sin. In most, it is covered by the movement of mercy, which lead to incarnation. With incarnation, the Messianity is not human, it is divine. It is all the more precious when it occurs without any melange. There is no doubt Christianity synthesizes both directions, human messianism, messianity, and divine messianity. I intend to analyze this existential in relation to an individual's wish for a terrestrial longevity with the sole purpose of benefiting others. In every soul, messianity is opposed by a counter-movement, which is often victorious. I am referring here to the desire to perpetuate one's life, which we can identify with selfishness or with the simple dread of dying. It is only fitting that we recall now the contempt in which such a project is sometimes held, not to mention that in case of its realization, it would seem like a malediction. To escape death, it is to be like the wandering Jew, that ghost of time, condemned to die with the last man, and who doesn't hate, nor does he like anyone. It should also be noted that despair always lurks in the dark when we are dealing with an attempt at salvation, which is not based upon a divine mandate, the duly confided mission, or a metaphysical guarantee, the assurance that there is a nirvana, so that the final victory is no longer a certainty, and manifold failures along a journey strewn with ambushes and treasons risk to exhaust and resolve in renunciation. I must also add that the paradigm that will be reflecting upon does not include those who succeeded in acquiring a prolonged existence for themselves, though they may heal diseases in Taoism, for example, by means of mental focus. Indeed, they didn't seek this transformation with the purpose of rescuing creatures. By a complete inversion of the orders of priorities, it may as well be that they have accomplished good deeds, as the famous Lu Tongpin, in order to acquire the immortality. The end of some, compassion, becomes a means to others. These exploratory considerations catch the main point of the lecture. A human messianity, not a divine one, that achieves an indefinitive extension of the existence, identified in a religious setting, not a profane setting, approached by the comparative method in order to underline its specificity and to reveal its implication. We identify three types of messianity: that of the saved one who decide to serve men, the three Nephites; then that of a self-awakened who, with dogged determination and boldness, dedicates all his being to the liberation of creature, the Bodhisattva; and finally, that of an immaculate in charge of the world and of bringing about the reign of justice, the Mahdi, in Shia Islam. Thus, our examination is focused mainly on the Mormon religion, the Buddhist religion of the Great Vehicle, and the Muslim Shia Imamate religion. In front of this audience, I will suppose that the Mormon text about the three Nephites are well known. So I will skip this part. And you are agreeing with me. I have 2 pages on this with quotation, you don't need it. The leading idea of a postponement of beatitude is all the more interesting as it is not drawn from the New Testament. So this idea of the Book of Mormon does not occur in the New Testament, though it could be backed up by Paul's statement that he wishes to be anathema and parted from Christ for the salvation of the people of his race. Romans 9. The common point is Christianity that doesn't hesitate when it comes to giving up one's own salvation, but the means differ. First, the three Nephites' renouncement is temporary. Second, Paul doesn't ask for a prolonged existence, and with good reason, since his wish doesn't require more than a single instant to come true. Third, the Nephites hardly dare, out of modesty, to express their desire, while all the power of Paul's wish lies in its solemn preparation, because he would like to win the adherence of the Jews by the intense strength of his love, which dare to yearn for the unattainable. One can also appreciate the nuances while resorting to the distinction of two ways of substitution. One in the place of others, and another substitution, you can grasp the meaning of that other substitution by the etymologic meaning of the word, and one underneath the others. So one in the place of the other and one underneath the other. Paul identifies with the first option, while the Nephites identify with the second one. Two meanings of the word substitution. With Paul, the first meaning, with the Nephite, the second. That's how the messianic particularities related to the permanent ministry of the three Nephites appear. Their lieutenancy resides in Christ's permanent presence among his people, presence of solicitude and help, let's say of phoria to lift up. The Nephites are the three mysterious pillars on which the church is built. They don't have the vocation to suffer physically, and even less to die in the place of others. However, are they spared all thorns in their flesh? If by this we understand not the body, nor even a weakness related to the frail human nature, nor even the mere tiredness caused by the apostolate, but compassion, we can be certain that they bear a great deal of injuries, those pertaining to the suffering caused by iniquities. It is said indeed, 3 Nephites 28, therefore, that they might not taste of death, there was a change wrought upon their bodies, but they might not suffer pain nor sorrow, save it were for the sin of the world. So there is suffering, but not bodily suffering or physical. A consequent modification in the bodily metabolism is to be understood here, one which the Mormon theologian Bruce McConkie confirms when he claims that the blood stops from flowing through the veins of the translated beings who possess henceforth the singular feature of living both in the visible reality and the invisible. This seems to imply a high speed, but no ubiquity. The three Nephites, bearing henceforth close similarities to angels, are unable to appear to all men at will. Let's add that the demon has no power over them. 3 Nephi 28. In these circumstances, their fate invites to a comparison with that of the 12th Imam of Shi'ism, the Mahdi, son of Hassan al-Askari. Like the other immaculate Imams, he is twice a mediator, being the face by means of which man meets Allah, and the ark of salvation, since he originates in the Creator's mercy, which is bestowed upon all his creatures. Being himself well guided, he leads humans towards paradise. Holder of the science of initiation, he is the best interpreter of the divine verses. His presence on earth is necessary in order to preserve it from extinction, because he is the pillar of the world. Quotation, the world never lacks an imam, claims one of them, Ja'far as-Sadiq, because without him it would be shaken. It is by him that Allah prevents the sky from coming tumbling down. A 1 hour or a split of a second absence would entail a catastrophe. This reminds us of the Jewish tradition of the 36 righteous men, Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, through whose merits the world carries on existing. As in case of the three Nephites and the Mahdi, they too lead a hidden life, committed entirely to the safeguard of creation. Though remaining unknown, their head and gleam cannot be prevented from becoming manifest, much in the manner of a sun wrapped in clouds. But unlike these Jews, they don't benefit from longevity. The eternal replaces them permanently with substitutes of equal moral quality. The Muslim mystic includes permuting people as well, in Arabic abdal. No need of permutation with the Mormons. And with regard to the Shia, it ends with the birth of the 12th Imam, whose career comes to a halt only at the end of times. The first 11 attain the world beyond successively, while the 9 Nephites reach it simultaneously, the other 9 of the 12. It is noteworthy that the indefinitive prolongation of the earthly life span doesn't connote any immortality in the strict sense, a characteristic of God alone, as the Apostle Paul likes to underline. Every soul will know death. Had it not have been for the divine never-ending watchfulness, the Shia Mahdi would have been murdered. There is room for death in him. The same applies to the three Nephites, about whom Christ says that at the parousia they will be granted incorruptibility in the blink of an eye. The mark of death upon flesh is a universal fact to Nephi. The possibility of death belongs to the constitution of all men, but that doesn't imply that someone dies, nor does it prevent us from envisaging the possibility of a material transformation. We saw that with the Nephites. As for the Mahdi, a tradition holds that he will preserve the physical appearance of a 40-year-old man until he dies, and he is living for more than 1,000 years. Another one holds that, like the other Imams, he casts no shadow. One is entitled to think that just as in Adam's case in paradise, he is not subject to illness. But one wouldn't go so far as to say that he is only life, as are the Taoist saints. The Mahdi situation is particularly distinctive in that he is subject to eschatological expectations, whereas the 36 just men of Jewish tradition and the three Nephites are waiting for Messiah, for his irruption in history, for some, for his glorious return, for others, in the interruption of history. Does he master history in some manner? Yes, to a certain extent, because it is true that Imams only die by their own will. It might be their own decision to shorten the delays. But as the Mahdi is not Allah himself, he remains accountable to a superior jurisdiction in which he is similar to the Jewish Messiah. The question remains as to whether his terrestrial existence is a self-sacrifice from his part, and we can only suggest a hypothesis. A Shia tradition holds that his ancestor, the Imam Hussein, had to choose at the time of the Battle of Karbala, in which he was massacred along with all his family, between an angelic intervention in his favor and meeting with Allah. His preference for the second option means that he gave priority to mystic over ethics, whereas the Mahdi shows a contrary subordination. In this respect, one needs to distinguish the reason of his eclipse in the year 941 from those of the elongation of his lifespan. The former ones, which obviously ignore the latter, justifies the eclipse by the fear of being killed. Even if death occurred at a canonical age, it will still be premature in this case. We also bring into discussion a test to which the Shia had to be put. As for the duration, it pertains essentially to the biblical and cosmic symbolism of number 12, revised by a speech attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. According to him, 12 Imams descending from Quraysh, his tribe, will succeed him, so that since there can't be a 13, and in case of the fulgurous advent comes late, the 12th one must be fully prepared in his capacity as God's responder before the faithful and as a living Quran to guide and to heal, to protect the being, or even to embellish it through his presence, with the purpose of standing ready at the moment chosen by God to avenge the Prophet's family for the bloody and moral offenses that it had suffered, and at the end of an eschatological battle to fill the world with justice in the same manner as it had been filled with iniquity and despotism. As the history of man is incapable by itself of implementing a program of practical reason through cutting off the immoral life by way of setting the basis of a civil society that would impose the law in universal manner, it is the Mahdi who must enforce the idea by means of violent rupture and of his quality of representing the epitome of wisdom in society. As far as his longevity is concerned, it is naturally said to be of a miraculous nature. But another line of explanation comes along with a list of people whose lifespan has reached several centuries, without violating natural laws. When enumerating several people who have attained an old age, with an emphasis on Noah, in order to lessen the importance of the Mahdi's case, Ibn Babuwi forgets, however, to note that those people aged, which means that we are dealing here with a different type of wonder. One sees that the Mahdi doesn't need to wish for excessive longevity. It is the situation itself that bestows it on him, as he is tied by the election and by his ontological dignity. This ontological dignity which is pre-existential to his mission. This dignity that anoints him for the testimony. When one learns that the Shia declare that he became Imam at his father's death when he was hardly 10 years old, it is clear that he hadn't had the time to make a request nor to accumulate merits that he would have laid at the service of his community. It is the being of awakening, the Bodhisattva himself, who takes care of that in a page of rare intensity that we owe to Shantideva, a 7th century Mahayanist author. I quote, "Having accomplished all these rituals by the virtue of the merit that I acquired, I can be for all beings the one who eases the pain." While starting his vow with recalling his achievements, the Bodhisattva adopts a logic of accumulation. If he wants to transfer substantial merits to others, in the same manner as Christ constitutes a treasure by his crucifixion, the Bodhisattva worth lie in his asceticism and elevation. But whereas the former uses the merits engendered from his passion in favor of man, the Bodhisattva does it in favor of himself. They both let themselves be consumed. The Christ in order to be able to share his own flesh and blood, the Bodhisattva by distributing what he has won. Ever since he has conceived, Christ has lived for others, which is not the case of the Bodhisattva, who must first realize that the return to himself is impossible or inept. Quotation, "His kindlessness is untiring because he sees the inexistence of the self, the emptiness or vacuity." This is how a Bodhisattva like Avalokiteshvara, progressively exalted by legends, started his career. While considering the 5 aggregations that constitute the phenomenal world to be empty: shapes, sensations, perceptions, mental products, and consciousness. As selfishness is no longer possible because there is no self, love becomes at once allocentric and completely disinterested. Quotation: if you do something for the benefit of others, no pride, no desire for retribution, have only one passion, the well-being of others. Having no longer an ego, the Bodhisattva has the strength to give it all away and to be fearless in front of death. Being very knowledgeable about psychology stratagems while having a view grounded on the emptiness principles, Shantideva goes even so far as to invite the candidate to universal commiseration to convince himself of a displacement of the ego's boundaries and even of transferring his own ipseity to others, so that the worry for others won't be prevented by any sort of worry for oneself. He says, why not consider the body of others as being me? To acknowledge our body as being a stranger is a well-known idea which doesn't pose any difficulty. In treating the self as full of shortcomings and the others as oceans of qualities, one is bound to strongly reject his own personality and to adopt the others. Man will then become interested in his fellow beings as parts of his own body. Why not get interested in man as part of humanity? We usually apply the idea of self to the soulless body, but not to others as well. In this way, if we are good to others, we experience not pride for it. One doesn't hope to be rewarded because one feeds oneself. Remarkable effect of emptiness. The transfer is possible because there is in fact no self. As the resistance of the self and its artifices are real in the world, a coup is necessary there. But the simple transfer to consider others as myself is not sufficient. I must also consider myself a stranger. The Bodhisattva advises his own self to renounce any interest because he sold it to others. It's a double movement, which Shantideva designates by the expression to inverse between myself and others. The reaction to the intolerable envelopes the universe and triggers the virtue of humanity beyond what Mencius had conceived. What the Chinese wise man treats as natural goodness requires, according to the Indian Shantideva, a transmutation by a decentralization of the person, whose soul is engraved with the will to exist only for itself, and a re-identification of oneself and of others. That explains the astonishment before the Bodhisattva, that pearl of beings, that unprecedented pearl, how it is born, since others feel no inclination, not even an interested one, toward the welfare of others. Unlike Christ, whose decision in favor of the world preceded his incarnation, the Bodhisattva has to grow self-aware in view of his awakening. Hence, the necessity of a formal engagement that rises being for others, developed up to the point of being two, over the ruins of being for oneself. A quotation: I wish I could be for the sick the remedy, the physician, the nurse, until the illness disappears. I wish I could calm with a rain of food and beverages the torment of hunger and thirst, and during periods of famines become myself beverage and food. I wish I could be for the poor an inexhaustible treasure to be ready to give them all the help they need. All my incarnations to come, all my possessions, all my past, present, and future merits, I abandon them with indifference so that the goal of all beings is reached. The nirvana is the abandonment of all, and my soul longs for the nirvana. Since I must abandon it all, it is better to give it to others. I give out this body to the good pleasure of all beings. Let them constantly hit it, offend it, cover it with dust. Let them make out of my body a toy, an object of derision and fun. I gave them my body. What is it to me? Let them make it do all the actions that might be agreeable to them. But I must not be for anyone an opportunity for any damage. If their heart is irritated at me and malicious, let even that be a means to achieve the ends of all. Let those who calumniate me, harm me, laugh at me, and all others get the enlightenment. I wish I could be the protector of all abandoned ones, the guide of those who walk, and for those who seek the other strand, to be the boat, the pavement, the bridge, to be the lamp of those who need a lamp, the bed of those who need a bed, the slave of those who need a slave, to be the stone of miracle, the urn of abundance, the magic formula, the plant that heals, the tree of wishes, the core of desires, as well as the earth and the other elements that serve the multiple countless beings spread in the infinite space. I wish I could be in every way useful to the beings who fill the universe, as long as they are not all freed. This stands in a sharp contrast to the ideal of Buddhism in the small vehicle, where the saint who gains access to nirvana separates himself from humanity, having looked solely after his own salvation. The Bodhisattva delays indefinitely his release by avoiding to cut the tie of transmigration. When driven by universal compassion, he takes on the suffering of beings, and when he works on instructing them and freeing them by means of the merit he accumulated, he is not set on his own deliverance. He longs for awakening, for accumulating virtues and identifying to the body of wisdom only for the good of others. Quotation, for all the kindness that he diffuses, he doesn't seek any retribution. He substitutes himself for others out of pure love. The nature of his engagement implies that he will be the last to enter complete nirvana after long centuries, at the end of all cycles, if that day ever comes. The everlasting presence on earth, which is here the equivalent of longevity, is not at all a source of enjoyment, but a pure, simple, and freely desired misfortune. What is noteworthy in his case is that it is he who grants the presence to himself, by suppressing or delaying extinction, and not by addition and transfiguration, as in the case with the three Nephites. It is he who forms the vow that ensures the conditions of its realization, because, on the one hand, there is no superior personal jurisdiction, there is no God in that religion, and on the other hand, because Buddhism admits the idea of ceaseless reincarnations until deliverance. It is not therefore from the idea of activity, as for Goethe, that he gets the conviction of his immortality, since nature must give a new shape to man when the present one won't be able to hold the mind, nor it is because he would be a natura naturans, as the painter Raphael, according to Nietzsche, that he would never die, but because of compassion, which pledges to be very careful to shield all creatures from pain, to obtain a profusion of profits for their benefit, and to work endlessly in his regard in both great things and the infinitely more insignificant ones. It is not the grace of a random God, but the surplus of messianity in relation to natural death and even to imperatives of reincarnation that bestows over life. If liberty is indeed the path of humanity throughout time, the individual can only set off down the road with a vow. Novalis used to say, only love possesses the talisman of eternal peace. The Bodhisattva allows himself to be strangled by the misery of man, as did Christ because of their sins. When taking the irrevocable decision to be in agony until the end of the world in the manner of Christ, of Pascal's Christ, of the Christ of Blaise Pascal. He allows the idea of human messianity to achieve perfection. He spells out its affective foundation. Quotation. The Bodhisattva holds at the bottom of his marrows the love of creatures as one has it for a single son. Therefore, his love works constantly towards salvation, as a dove cherishes its offspring and remains to sit on them in the state repulsion is destroyed. It is the same with the compassionate when it comes to creatures. They are all his children. The scalar logic of emphasis is felt in the following paragraph. He who offers a charity meal for a few persons is celebrated like a holy man for giving during one moment and without consideration a small pittance that will sustain the poor during half a day. What is there to say then of he who gives to an infinite number of beings during an infinite time the satisfaction of all their desires, inexhaustible until the exhaustion of all the beings who people the universe? As far as he is concerned, one can say that he goes beyond the norm, but that he grounds his cause in an unshakable basis. We owe an attenuated mode of the postponement of beatitude to André Schwarzbart, a French novelist, who pictured Jesua, meaning Jesus, considered to be no more or less than a Jewish just, remaining at the door of paradise so that he doesn't forget the humans in favor of whom he too awaits Messiah. The attenuation lies in inefficiency. Throughout his life, the just man holds a position of intercession and substitution. When he dies, he makes room for another and doesn't pursue his previous task. The novelist Jesua is not similar to the Bodhisattva, who is committed body and soul to creatures. He is content with being by their side through devout thought, and especially by means of depriving himself of paradise, so that he becomes associated to their hopes. No preaching, nor a direct action as with the Bodhisattva, but only a participation, a presence. Death is taken seriously, and by way of consequence, Jesuit's torments as well, though it does not have the redeeming value which the Christians assign to it. This is opposed to the Muslim tradition, which holds that Mary's son escaped the cross in order to be set aside for the justice era. He will come down from one of the cosmic heavens at the end of times, either in the capacity as Mahdi for most Sunni, either as an auxiliary of the 12th Imam according to Shia. Like Jesua, he is at the same time absent as flesh and present to the world, but in a different manner, since his status of living being allows him to come back. Finally, there is a messianic vow that doesn't call for a prolonged terrestrial existence, nor for a renouncement to paradise. It is one that intends to use the sky, or paradise, to the benefit of the earth. It is true that the effort entailed doesn't allow for experience of supreme happiness. One is entitled to wonder whether the vow expressed in such a moving manner by Teresa of the Child Jesus, Thérèse de l'Enfant Jésus, the Catholic saint, doesn't meet that of the Bodhisattva, with the exception of this. I quote Thérèse, "If God grants my desires, my sky or heaven will, but she says, mon ciel, my sky will occur on earth until the end of the world. Yes, I want to spend my sky doing good on earth. When the angel says, time is through, then I will take a rest. I will be able to enjoy, because the number of elected will be complete, and all will have entered in joy and in rest. By sky, one must understand both a duration and the grace that the saint receives in order to share. It is suggested that in order to remain present for the world, she will go without celestial joys, since she can't feel them until her task is accomplished. But as it is her sky, of which she will make charitable use, this deprivation doesn't imply the tortures that the Bodhisattva declares being ready to undergo. Teresa's model is the resurrected and interceding Christ who declares in Matthew 28, "And I will be forever with you till the end of the world." But contrary to Christ and the Bodhisattva, she is not entirely in control of the granting of her wish, which has to meet first with God's approval. He alone possesses the supernatural means for it to take place. Besides, she must wait to find out the answer, whereas the three Nephites gets it at once. The existential decisive vow aims first at stimulating virtue and strengthening the will. Gandhi is explicit about it. He says, "A vow corresponds to an unshakable decision and helps us to defend ourselves from temptations. All of humanity has observed through experience that without an inflexible decision, progress is not possible." This is why Shantideva treaty is enriched with a large amount of advice addressed to the candidate with regard to the condition of Bodhisattva, concerning means to destroy passions or to reach awakening in favor of others. Even when he seems to have already expressed the vow, as if it was his loyalty to it that allowed him to accumulate merits and thereby to ensure the efficient translation of it. Hence the verse, "As soon as the mind embraced the tenacious thought of freeing the unlimited mass of beings, even if it's sometimes lulled and distracted, the flows of his merit constantly grow like the infinity of the universe. In spite of his beautiful optimism, he is exposed to danger due to his commitment, and he poses a serious danger to the universal good in case he has to be corrupted." I quote, "Any failing of the Bodhisattva is very serious, because when he sins, it is the good of all beings that is destroyed." From there proceeds the necessity of keeping away the awareness of the vow. What I have promised, I must execute scrupulously. If I don't make an effort today, I will fall from depth to depth. The existential decision implies an engagement, a non-negotiable pledge. It requires time, not only because the subject himself, being circumscribed by time, remains sensitive to his own fantasies, but also because those to the profit of which the vow is expressed are in history, are not the eternal or some supratemporal reality. Whereas everybody can become Bodhisattva and is even invited to make a vow which becomes a rallying shout and a call to transfiguration, the Mahdi and Christ cannot be repeated nor truly imitated. Of all three, one can say that they substitute themselves for humanity. But the Mahdi is the only one among them to substitute in the sense of being under. The Bodhisattva and Christ substitute themselves for all of humanity as well, in the sense of being in place of. While the eternal Word, in becoming incarnate, assumes human nature as such, reaching thus the status of a new Adam, head of the multitude, the Bodhisattva tolerates creatures with the sole aim of liquefying their ipseity. In other words, whereas in Christianity human fullness is recomposed out of the divine fullness of Trinity's second hypostasis. Hypostasis in the Mahayana must dissolve itself first so that the I can become all others. But that vacuity itself renders this gesture accessible to all, whereas the divine and permanent plenitude of the second hypostasis renders the act unique. The three Nephites naturally remain below these figures because neither their ontological constitution nor their vocation authorizes them to take on humanity by substitution. They don't have the becoming in the place of others. The reader will have noticed that in the analyzed cases, the pronounced vow doesn't confront the impossible. In the Buddhism of the big vehicle, it is the cosmic arrangement itself that includes the factor of realization. In the theistic religions, it is God who needs to accept the request. The messianic existential become a supernatural existential as soon as the divine call ordering him to the kingdom, natural goodness achieves a superior value and pictures itself as having henceforth an effect over the steps of providence. A revelation made to Joseph Smith says about the saints, they were meant to be a light to the world and saviors of men. Thank you.